is a consular ship. We're on a diplomatic mission.
Start tearing this ship apart piece by piece until you find those tapes. Find the passengers of this vessel. I want them alive!
That was the voice of David Prowse, the 6'6" English bodybuilder who donned the Darth Vader suit in all 3 films of the original Star Wars trilogy. On set, Prowse was concerned that his voice was being muffled up by the mask, but George Lucas assured him that all of his lines would be re-recorded later in the studio. And they were. Just not by Prowse. George Lucas had a quote-unquote deeper, darker sound in mind. He wanted the voice of esteemed and classically trained stage and film actor Orson Welles.
Be melodramatic.
Star of The Third Man, creator of Citizen Kane, one of the most famous actors and filmmakers in the world. But on second thought, Lucas feared Welles's voice would be too recognizable.
And must this great public be regaled with a hanging?
And so Lucas turned to another actor, whom he'd heard about through a couple of screenwriter friends of his. It was March 1st, 1977, and a 43-year-old James Earl Jones walked into a recording booth at Goldwyn Studios to lay down some of the most iconic lines in cinematic history.
The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
2.5 hours later, Jones walked out with a check for $7,500 and not so much as a credit in the movie. As a matter of fact, for another 20 years, James Earl Jones would remain uncredited in A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, with the actor's own blessing. Jones considered David Prowse to be the true actor behind the character of Vader, thinking of his own performance as little more than a special effect.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
But of course, the voice of Darth Vader is so much more. What Jones and Lucas managed to achieve in just 2.5 hours in a sound booth was nothing short of culture-changing, breathing life into what would become possibly the most recognized villain in cinema. And how did they do it? Well, according to Jones, by keeping things relatively simple. Vader, says Jones, is a man who never learned the beauties and subtleties of human expression, so he figured out the key was to keep it on a very narrow band of expression. On the original Star Wars, this approach was something of a product of necessity. Jones and Lucas simply didn't have the time to explore the character's history, his psychology, the characteristics that make us human, that make us complicated. These were facets Jones later admitted he hoped to explore when it finally came time to record for The Empire Strikes Back, but George Lucas said no. Whatever they had done before, that's what Lucas wanted again. Yet despite these constraints, there remains a clear mastery to Jones's vocal performance. I mean, no doubt Hayden Christensen was performing his dialogue as a burgeoning Darth Vader on a very narrow band of expression too.
Me, a master. I'm overwhelmed, sir.
Just maybe not quite to the same level of cultural impact.
That's just a little joke.
Now, James Earl Jones and his legendary timbre aren't the only ingredients to comprise the sound of Darth Vader. Vader is menacing due one part to his physical suit and stature, one part to the bass of Jones's voice, and another part to what lies beneath them. His cold, mechanical breathing. And for that, we can thank this guy, Star Wars sound designer Ben Burtt, who took the description of an oddly filtered voice made through a complex breathing mask from George Lucas's script and brought it to life by breathing into the regulator of a scuba tank. Burtt is also responsible for recording the playback of Jones's vocal tracks in rooms of various sizes in order to achieve the effect of the lines being spoken from inside of a mask. Darth Vader is iconic for so many reasons, thanks not only to Jones, or Prowse, or Burtt, or even Lucas, but to the trilogy's cinematographers, to John Mollo and Brian Muir, who constructed Vader's suit and mask, to Star Wars conceptual artist Ralph McQuarrie, and to the samurai of Akira Kurosawa's films that inspired Lucas. But had we gotten this?
You are part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. Take her away.
Instead of this.
I
You are part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. Take it away!
There's no knowing how the legacy of the character and the Star Wars franchise might have changed. Darth Vader's conception and the property of Star Wars as a whole is an exceedingly rare coincidence of history, and one that will no doubt continue to have an incalculable impact on popular culture for generations to come. Let's get one thing out of the way. Good narrative momentum is not how fast your story moves. It's simply how your story moves to keep your audience invested in it. We can of course examine the overall pacing of a given film, but I think it's much simpler to think about the impact of momentum on the scene level. Because like a film, a good scene can tell a complete story through structure. Inciting incident, rising action, midpoint,
You're sheltering enemies of the state, are you not?
crisis,
Yes.
climax, and resolution. But how much time do you devote to each of these points? And what about the space between the points? Right now, let's focus on just the last three: crisis, climax, and resolution. Three men are sitting in a restaurant. One is there to kill the other two, using a gun planted for him in the bathroom. When we reach the crisis point of the scene, the man will make a choice: take the gun from the bathroom and follow in the family business, or leave it there and retain some semblance of a normal life. After that, climax and resolution. He'll kill the men and flee the restaurant. Now let's see what happens if we let the scene play out
I have to go to the bathroom.
with no space between each beat. What do you think? Does it work? I think it's logical, but what do we lose for the sake of shock and greater momentum? 1. We lose tension. Let him find the gun. Let him first not find it. Let him take a moment, breathe, collect himself, survey the space, even sit back down, slow things down, and let the tension in the scene build. 2. Connection to the audience. I think this moment between crisis and climax is one of the most fascinating points in a narrative. If the crisis is where the hero is faced with a choice, then the climax is where we see the consequences of that choice on the story. But it's the space between the two, the space when the choice has been made but the consequences are still uncertain, that reveals the emotional impact of that decision on the person who made it. And whether that space is presented to us for a moment, for 30 seconds, or for an entire train ride, it provides an invaluable opportunity to let the audience in to the mind of our character. So the next time you're watching a scene, or editing your own, pay attention. Where are the beats? When do they hit? And what use is being made of the space between them? I'm Danny Boyd. Thank you so much for watching.
You guys do something really interesting that I think Quentin Tarantino has made a career out of doing, which is changing an audience's perception of what an actor can do. Obviously, you did it with Robert Pattinson in Good Time, and I think you're doing it with Adam Sandler here. Are you guys just looking at actors differently than other directors are? I mean, what are you seeing in these guys?
I think we're
It's difficult to imagine it today, what with the success of The Lighthouse and recent comic book movie ventures, but when Josh and Penny Safdie's indie thriller Good Time was released in 2017 to worldwide critical acclaim and a 6-minute standing ovation at the Cannes Festival, a shared thought passed through many a viewer's mind, and that was, I can't believe that's the guy from Twilight.
I saw this still from the previous movie on the banner of a website, and then kind of sent this at a crazy obsessive email saying, I know this is supposed to happen, it's meant to be. Right. And I mean, I hadn't seen anything, I hadn't seen the trailer or anything, and we sort of agreed to do a movie which didn't exist.
It was 2014, and the Safdie brothers were casting for their dark comedy, Uncut Gems, when Robert Pattinson cold emails them on little more than a feeling, pleading that they let him in on their next project, whatever it may be, knowing little more of their work than an image from a film on a website. It was an email that didn't just change the trajectory of Pattinson's career, it also challenged the brother directors' signature approach to their creative process. Known best for their New York-centric underground neo-realism cinema and their guerrilla-style filmmaking, the Safdies had long opted for what the industry has coined street casting, casting amateur actors, or often non-actors, in their movies, a choice born half out of financial necessity, but half too out of an ardent desire to find real people with real lives that mirrored those of their characters, people who could tap into their own life experiences to garner performances that come from a genuine, unprocessed place.
So it's her personal story, right? Why'd you decide to have her play her own role?
It's her, you just said it, it's her personal story.
The Safdies' film Heaven Knows What follows Harley Boggs, an itinerant drug addict performed by Arielle Holmes, the very woman whom the movie's story is about, conceived of and shot prior to her eventual rehabilitation. In fact, fascinated by Holmes' personal story, it was the Safdies who first commissioned Holmes to write her life into a memoir before then using that memoir as the basis for the film. Heaven Knows What was also the movie that prompted Robert Pattinson's elusive letter to the Safdies while they were preparing for Uncut Gems. The trouble Josh and Benny Safdie faced when they received Pattinson's email was that Uncut Gems, a movie about a compulsive gambler working within New York's Diamond District, didn't have a role in it fit for Pattinson to play. Beyond that, the brother directors had a reputation for turning down offers made to them by big agencies and mainstream studios. But after the festival circuit success of their prior films, the Safdies also knew, and their producers knew, that when an international star like Robert Pattinson emails you, you write back. As Benny Safdie has said, if you shut yourself off completely and aren't open to those kinds of conversations, you're not going to learn anything. And we want to learn. Moved by Pattinson's genuine magnetism and his desire to lose himself in a role, the Safdies decided to put Uncut Gems on the back burner for a few more years in order to craft the completely original Good Time around Pattinson. Their mission was to retroactively street cast him, to make an unmistakable celebrity vanish into a street-smart and desperate con artist from Queens, as though it were his story. The actor's story, as though to reverse engineer their own ideology towards casting and storytelling. And they did.
You know, with Rob, you know, he's not Connie. He doesn't come from that world. So like, it was kind of an effort for us to know how he would move in the narrative, was to just really know this character, and for him to be able to pull from a life of character development.
JJ, it's game night. You should be stretching out. Hang on, sorry. Goodbye.
In many ways, Uncut Gems, which finally saw a 2019 release after a decade in the making, bears a cast ensemble born from a marriage between the Safdie brothers' street casting roots and their newfound resources. On one hand, the Safdies could now afford a star, and they saw something in Adam Sandler that they wanted for the role of Howard Ratner.
We were lucky to follow his comedy special, 100% Fresh, because he did 50 nights at 3.5 hours of material every night. And our script was over 160 pages long. I mean, it's a shorter movie, but it was a lot of dialogue that he's supposed to say very quickly. And he just had the ability to take this kind of, you know, Rodney Dangerfield style character and turn him into a real life person.
And stand-up comedians, it's like if somebody gets up and it sounds like they're just kind of reciting, it doesn't work. you know, but the best kind of figure out a way to make it feel like, oh, I'm just up here saying all this stuff, like we're just having a great time, you know, and that's the key.
But Uncut Gems, like past films the Safdies have made, is still full of non-actors and first-time actors. Breakout actress Julia Fox, musician The Weeknd, sports radio host Mike Francesa, and most notably, retired basketball player Kevin Garnett, who much of the film's plot is centered around. Many of the smaller parts of the film, too, were played not by bit actors, but by real-life jewelers, and the Safdies' exterior sets were often left open, allowing real New Yorkers on the streets to walk freely through them. It wasn't that any of these decisions were essential to the film's story, but they were essential to the authenticity of the world that the Safdie brothers wanted to capture. And no matter how successful Josh and Benny Safdie become, the notion of authenticity and visceral immersion will likely remain the single most defining characteristic of their filmmaking. To identify that which makes the individual special and real, and to craft characters and stories not around what the reputations members of the cast bring as actors, but around who they are as human beings.
You don't meet an actor and think about the movies they've done. You meet somebody and try to see them for who they are, and then you try to build that out another way. That just comes from our, you know, we've worked with a lot of non-professionals, first-time actors, so we're used to kind of meeting people for who they are and then building it out.
Cause just like you, I've been trying to mediate, see the value in things before it all depreciate. I found myself protecting my mindset so I don't deviate. Then it start to pull me back, right in an egregious state.
Not a lot of filmmakers are telling stories about the American Midwest. But Chloe Zhao is. And she's telling stories about people, not characters. From her debut film Songs My Brothers Taught Me, a look at the youth on a South Dakota reservation who have little to no say in their own prospects, to the Oscar-winning Nomadland, about the itinerant workers forced to postpone their retirements indefinitely following the 2008 financial crisis. Zhao's work depicts individuals at their most vulnerable. And for the majority of her career so far, she's been putting those individuals' stories to screen in a uniquely vulnerable way. Zhao's sophomore film, 2017's The Rider, follows Brady Blackburn, a rodeo cowboy from Pine Ridge, South Dakota, who, up until a few days before we meet him, was one of the rising stars of his local circuit, a man devoted to his work and to the culture surrounding it. But following a head injury, he's told by family and doctors he can't ride anymore. And so Zhao's film effectively chases the fallout of that blow, of a man with nowhere left to turn, living out of a trailer with his often drunk, ever prideful father and his younger sister, Lily.
Or respect about your favorite thing to do or not.
You're as stubborn as your brother.
Set against a remote, desolate landscape at the heart of Midwestern America, The Rider is in a very true sense a tale of the American cowboy. Only this isn't fiction or folktale. Brady Blackburn is a real person, played by Brady Jandrew, a horse trainer and former rodeo cowboy who was really injured less than a year before filming began, and who lends not only his story to the screen, but his body. As do Jandrew's father and sister, and the character of Lane Scott, a real-life friend of Brady's who sustained a riding injury of his own that's put him in a wheelchair for life. In fact, when Brady visits Lane in a rehabilitation center, the two reminisce over actual videos of Scott's rodeo days that can still be found online. Every role in The Rider, lead, supporting, background, was plucked straight from the Pine Ridge community. And it isn't just this film. Casting non-actors is an essential practice for Zhao, beginning with her debut film 2 years prior, and in fact it was while shooting that film that Zhao first met Brady. Zhao was fascinated by Brady's demeanor and abilities as a trainer, although at the time the two couldn't work out what story to tell, and it wasn't until Brady was injured the following year that their narrative began to fall into place. Zhao returned to Pine Ridge and shot a film that she describes as 65% Brady's life and 35% creative liberties. The result is neither documentary nor fiction, but a uniquely authentic opportunity for a non-actor cast to perform his own mistakes, his own triumphs, his own losses. Brady is surrounded not by performers, but by neighbors, not by sets, but by his neighborhood. Zhao's aim is not to artificially reconstruct Brady's story, but to empower Brady to tell it himself. But Chloe Zhao's approach to storytelling was met with a new kind of challenge in 2020's Nomadland, Zhao's first adaptation of a book, a non-fiction work of the same name by Jessica Bruder, and her first feature film with a professional actor. While Zhao's usual casting tactics applied to the majority of the film's characters, Nomadland's protagonist, Fern, sits as a fictional core to an otherwise true story of the itinerant experience occurring across the Midwest.
And I worked in human resources there for a few years. That was my last full-time job. I did a lot of part-time jobs. I cashiered at the Empire Store. I was a substitute teacher at the school for 5 years.
Didn't the Empire mine shut down and then all of the resident workers had to relocate?
Yeah, about a year ago.
So when do you need to get back to work?
Now?
Played by the inimitable Frances McDormand. It was actually McDormand and producer Peter Spears who first optioned Bruder's book for the movie, seeking out Zhao to co-develop and direct it. And who better than McDormand to carry Fern into the reality of Nomadland's story? Someone truthful and at once capable of navigating the intimate elements of a life set outside of the mainstream. Famously reclusive, refusing far more interviews than she ever gives, McDormand is an actress existing as far from the spotlight as a successful career in Hollywood will allow. And still, Nomadland was a challenge to McDormand's conventions, as much as working with a professional actor was to Zhao's. Because Zhao wanted to stick as closely to a non-actor's experience as possible, McDormand was asked to share more and align with her character more intimately than usual. Zhao convinced McDormand to get one of her lifelong friends to play her sister for good chemistry, but when Zhao suggested they incorporate McDormand's real-life son and Joel Cohen, her husband, McDormand resisted. In her view, Fern as a character had to diverge from herself somewhere, or else the film would fall into the territory of documentary, or perhaps for McDormand, personal fantasy. So the two worked together to devise Fern as a somewhat alternate version of McDormand's self. Had she pursued a personal dream of hers of leaving Hollywood for the highway, Fern is an emotional proxy for understanding this community. Her personal history is less important. What takes priority is her wayward presence. McDormand worked real hours at odd jobs like the rest of her ensemble, and lived out of an RV for months.
All right, let me just say that this is a lot more complicated than I thought.
Oh, it's very, very complicated.
Uh-huh.
It's taken me a long time to patch all the peeling paint on this van. So are you quitting on me?
No, I'm not quitting.
Beyond McDormand and the actor David Strathairn, most of Nomadland's characters are still non-actors that Zhao cast along the way. Fern's visit to the Badlands National Park is accompanied by actual tourists. Swanky, Bob Wells, and Linda May are all real itinerant workers who appear in Jessica Bruder's original reporting. At its core, Zhao's philosophy of filming and casting seems to be one of non-intrusion, favoring small crews, not bulldozing a world with replications of what already exists there. The less your productions disrupt, the more organically an environment's stories can come to life. And in turning her lens on real individuals, on real communities, values, and vulnerabilities, Zhao challenges herself to find ways around the real walls that real people raise. In doing so, she is able to tease out stories of hardship and passion with a deep and alluring emotional honesty, in a way most films can only imitate And while the nature of Chloe Zhao's later work with Marvel didn't allow her to implement many of her signature story settings or casting methods, hopefully she'll find time to return to the Midwest soon and unearth yet another personal tale, long waiting to be told.
The power of the sun in the palm of my hand.
Precious tritium is the fuel that makes this project go. There's only 25 pounds of it on the whole planet. I'd like to thank Harry Osborn and Oscorp Industries for providing it.
When you create a character, you want to make it as different from the normal as possible so that he's distinctive. If you see a silhouette in the dark, you know who it is. That's the way to define characters.
Hey, I'm Danny Boyd, and that
Here's what they want. By practicing and action.
is Willem Dafoe,
Makes this project go.
pretending to be Otto Octavius on the set of Spider-Man 2.
I want to thank Harry Osborn and Oscorp Industries for providing it. Excellent, Willem.
But of course, we're not really here to talk about Dafoe. Incredible as he is, I did a whole episode on him and his Green Goblin a few months ago and what made him so great. So today, I want to do something similar and highlight really one of the other great comic book movie villains in one of the greatest movie sequels of all time. This is Alfred Molina, the real Dr. Octavius, in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2.
And now on to the main event. Give me the blue light, Rosie.
So, back in the 1970s and into the 80s, Doc Ock was pretty much tied up there with the Green Goblin as Spider-Man's greatest nemesis. He was the ultimate foil. He was like Peter Parker if Parker never had an Uncle Ben to tell him that
with great power comes great responsibility.
Or a father to tell him that
with great power comes great responsibility.
Or an aunt to tell him that
and with great power there must also come great responsibility.
Best thing about him though, he just had these great arms.
You could climb up the wall of a building with him, he could crush things.
That Spider-Man co-creator Stan Lee.
So he was a worthy adversary for Spider-Man, which is a hard thing to find.
Crazy scientist turns himself into some kind of a monster. 4 mechanical arms welded right onto his body. Guy named Otto Octavius winds up with 8 limbs. What are the odds?
Then a couple decades later, move over to Hollywood, and the character would finally be brought to the big screen by a lauded British actor, not exactly known for his work on big action blockbusters.
Tell me honestly what you think. I've always tried to make each job as different from the last one as possible.
If you're a real painter, you'll paint because you can't live without painting. You'll paint till you die. Okay?
And after Frida, this couldn't be more different.
A Fiddler on the Roof.
Then there was Molina's theater background.
This beloved musical has traveled all over the world.
So you're appearing on Broadway, starring in Fiddler on the Roof, Tony nominated for that, and here you are in one of the big blockbusters of the summer playing an octopus, basically. Is that what they call range in acting?
But that range was key, because like with Dafoe's Goblin before him, Molina isn't playing just a villain, is he?
Did Edison sleep before he turned on the light? Did Marconi sleep before he turned on the radio? Did Beethoven sleep before he wrote the Fifth?
Did Bernoulli sleep before he found the curves of quickest descent?
Oh, Rosie, I love this boy.
I like the fact that these characters are very complicated, very complex. You know, they're bad, but they're intelligent as well. They think a great deal. So they're very interesting parts to play.
You know, and like all great villains, he's become a villain kind of reluctantly, or almost by accident.
Peter and Otto are both intelligent, they're driven by science, bound by love, gifted extraordinary powers, and they each set out to save the world, in their own way. But there's a flip somewhere. One deviates left, one deviates right, and in the words of comic book author J. Michael Straczynski, if Spider-Man is the geek gone good, then Octavius is the geek gone bad.
And now let me introduce my assistants.
But when we talk about Doc Ock, we're not just talking about Otto Octavius, the character, or Alfred Molina, the actor. We're talking about that thing, or rather those four things that give this particular villain his name, his visual identity, that defining characteristic, and about what it took to bring that aspect of this character to life.
Yeah, four mechanical arms, four tentacles. It was challenging and difficult, but we tried very hard to create a vocabulary of movement, a way of moving that was natural and, didn't look too uncomfortable.
And to achieve all that,
we had 16 puppeteers.
At full bore, 4 puppeteers on each arm, because for the vast majority of medium shots and close-ups and a few of the action sequences, these were effects done on set, in camera, in real time. This was a decision made on day one between both Raimi and Molina under the belief that practical puppets would be a saving grace, not a novelty. That they should be viewed as more valuable to the finished product, not as more expensive. It gives the actor something real to interact with, and the director something real to direct.
We realized, of course, that this was a crucial and integral part of the characterization. And we had lots of long and detailed rehearsals with the puppetry team.
The arms needed to not only convey motion, but also an intricate range of emotion.
It was very interesting because these 4 arms do very different things, and they're very strong and they can be very delicate.
They were characters as much as anyone else, with personalities, moods. Each arm, by the way, had a name that Molina actually gave them. He called them Larry, Harry, Moe, and Flo, after the Three Stooges, plus Flo, the most coordinated of the 4, responsible for removing his sunglasses, giving him sips of his drink, lighting a cigar, plus a whole slew of stuff that never even made it into the movie, but had to be possible. Not everything we see could be done for real.
Okay. We tried to make the tentacles practical whenever we could, because clearly that was always the most effective way of doing it. When they're real, they're real. There's no two ways about it. But there are certain shots that obviously that can't be done.
We could rebuild, enlarge the containment field, make it.
But that wasn't the real problem.
We measured every inch of their body. We cyber scanned every inch of them from head to toe. We did a lot of motion capture on their movements, facial expressions, how they open and close their eyes, how they smile, how they frown, pretty much all of the range of emotions that we can get.
In Spider-Man 1, the effects team had an advantage. Both the hero and the villain wore masks, and that made the work put into making believable CG characters in impossible-to-shoot scenarios less difficult. But cut to the sequel,
because we had to intercut a lot with either a stunt Doc Ock or the real Alfred Molina, our skin and flesh had to hold up to very, very close scrutiny. And it's something that's been very difficult in CG in the past, so we knew that was going to be our biggest challenge.
Animating a human face and then making that face look real back in 2003, 2004, that was cutting edge. And what shot was the trickiest to get right?
I will not die a monster.
Doc Ock pulls this whole fusing machine down, and this last time we see him, he's full screen, and he's all CG, intending it to look like a real actor. And he drifts away down into blackness, ultimately. And I don't know that we've ever scrutinized an image like that, CG, that close on the screen before.
If I were a rich man, all day long I'd biddy biddy bum. If I were a wealthy man.
So you get some great actors, some great characters, a bit of innovative tech, and a director pulled from the unlikeliest corner of the industry, who actually cares about making a great movie. It's pretty much rote today, but back then, these were huge risks these studios were taking, and lucky for us, it paid off. I'm Danny Boyd. Thank you so much for watching.
Back to formula.
Hi.
Remember, this wasn't normal.
I'm Danny Boyd.
Making movies from comic books.
And today I want to talk about this guy.
You're pathetically predictable.
The Green Goblin.
Green Goblin, you like that? Mr. Jameson. Made it up myself.
But also this guy.
Peter, may I introduce my father, Norman Osborn? I'd like you to meet my father, Norman Osborn.
Harry's father.
Norman Osborn.
Two sides of a coin, and played with zero restraint by this guy.
William Dafoe.
Willem Dafoe, everybody.
In the 2002 San Raimi classic,
The Amazing Spider-Man!
Spider-Man.
My name's the Human Spider.
I don't care, get out there.
No, he got my name wrong.
Get
you gotta
out
tell
there,
him.
you moron!
Ready? Let's go.
It's just strange. One day someone's walking around, going to work, alive, and then nothing. People just disappear.
So it's the middle of 2000.
Kinda makes me feel like river dancing.
Defoe is hot on the heels of Boondock Saints and American Psycho.
The general consensus is...
He decides that he wants to do something big.
I was making a movie in Spain.
The world belonged to me.
So he reaches out to the studios, and he finds out that Sony is adapting Spider-Man.
And they sent a casting director to film me in my hotel room doing some scenes.
God, it's true.
In short, ladies and gentlemen of the board, costs are down, revenues are up, and our stock has never been higher.
But remember, the studio didn't actually ask Defoe to do this.
What?
As a matter of fact, Sony made it perfectly clear to Defoe that they had a pretty hefty list of dudes already in line for the Green Goblin. People they told him would be better qualified.
You're out, Norman.
But Defoe was enthralled that this huge studio was taking a chance on somebody like Sam Raimi, and by extension, Tobey Maguire.
I'm not a doctor. I haven't been to medical school. I haven't even been to high school.
And so, tooth and nail, Defoe fights for it.
That time, I was like literally put on tape to convince these people that I was their guy.
I chose my path, you chose the way of the hero. And they found you amusing for a while, the people of this city. But the one thing they love more than a hero is to see a hero fail, fall, die trying.
But Defoe didn't just want to do it. He was adamant that nobody else, not another actor, and not a stunt double, would or even could do it. So he sends his tape in, the studio is convinced that they had no idea what they were talking about, and when filming on Spider-Man begins a few months later, Defoe makes an agreement with Sam Raimi that as long as the Green Goblin is on camera, it would be him behind the mask. Which, by the way,
here's the real truth,
isn't normal. So 99 times out of 100, on a big movie like this, that mask goes down, the camera cuts, and that actor is on the first flight back home. Stunt double steps in, they ADR the lines in later, but like a few others out there, Defoe wasn't interested in that.
You know, I like, partly from my theater background, I like doing physical things.
He wants to do his own stunts.
To be on a wire, to fly around.
To fight, to fall. After all, half the role Defoe fought so hard for was the Green Goblin, the monster in a mask. For Defoe, that's still a character under there. Somebody that still has to emote, still needs physicality, gesture, carriage, things Defoe says stunt folks, as non-actors, well, they just aren't trained for.
We are who we choose to be. Now choose! No!
And so Defoe embraced it, because all that physical work, time, limitations of the costume, at the end of the day, that's what fuels the characterization. Right?
That's exactly what it does. It helps just to stimulate your pretending. It takes you away from yourself.
Misery, misery, misery. That's what you've chosen. I offered you friendship, and you spat in my face.
But the Green Goblin? Well, that's just half the story.
Sure.
Are you ready?
Yeah. I'm sorry I'm late. Work was murder. I think of my role in this movie as Norman Osborn first, and the Green Goblin grows out of an aspect of Norman Osborn. And Norman Osborn is an interesting character.
What do I do?
Osborn is ambitious, he demands perfection.
You know how much I sacrificed?
And these are traits that cut through and define his relationships.
You're busy. You're an important man. I understand.
That's no excuse.
Because I'm proud of you. He's got a dark side and a light, positive side.
General Slocum, good to see you again.
He believes in science.
Mr. Balkan, Mr. Fargus. He believes he's interested in developing the physical and mental capabilities of a human being through science.
And in the trial that went wrong, what happened? What were the side effects?
And so basically, there are positive implications to all of that.
And insanity.
And there's the dark side.
And the Green Goblin is the manifestation of that dark side.
But if there's one scene that epitomizes that duality, it's the mirror scene.
I don't understand.
Did you think it was coincidence?
The mirror scene's cool. Sam Raimi gave me Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde to read before I did that.
And Raimi and Defoe would shoot the whole thing.
You killed them. We killed them.
In single takes.
In the final thing, for whatever reason, they cut it. But we always shot it in one take.
Performance enhancers. Bingo.
I had to dance with the camera a lot.
There's only one.
On that scene.
Who can stop us?
Also, check this out. This is Willem Dafoe smiling. Those are his natural teeth. But if you notice Dafoe's teeth throughout Spider-Man, you'll see that they're perfect.
I did have caps on my teeth, the front tooth teeth, because one of the producers at Sony said, we can't have a CEO of a big company with that gap between his teeth. It's just not credible. He would have fixed his teeth.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But I was like, okay.
So whenever you see Norman Osborn on screen, he has these caps on. But in the mirror scene, when Defoe's playing the Green Goblin persona, they thought, hey, why don't we just leave them off? But anyway.
But, yeah, it's not what I usually do, but I like doing all kinds of things because it keeps you fresh and keeps you, checking yourself out to say, why do I do this? What's important to me? What do I see? What's happening? What adjustments do I got to make? What do I see going on in the world? That's what it's about.
Hi, this is Cinemastix. I'm Danny Boyd. Even long before Technicolor, filmmakers have been figuring out ways of using color to guide our understanding of what's on screen, like using different film tints to signify different time periods or states of mind. And for as long as we've been able to put color to character, we've been creating costumes so iconic that we're still paying tribute to them today. The right costume is invaluable. It can tell a story, help build the world, or give someone their identity. In a movie whose color palette is largely the oppressive browns and grays of its genre, consider what happens when a character chooses to do this. Color is descriptive. It can show off a character's eccentricity, it can reflect someone's mood, or it can show when a character doesn't quite fit in.
What happened to you?
Color contrast tells our eyes where to look, and how extreme you emphasize that contrast is up to you. Red is the color our brains react to the strongest, and it can represent passion or violence. But the use of a particular color doesn't have to be exclusive to a particular mood or trait. An association with a color can be imposed by the filmmaker or by the audience, and the associations we choose can be attached to an idea or to a person. But color can also be used to show a change in character. What does it mean when a character starts a movie alone wearing one color and ends it in love wearing something else? Even a hint of a color can give that character power. But you don't need bold color choices to show an evolution or a dynamic. What does it tell you about the internal conflict of a character who goes from tattered grays and whites to solid blacks? Or someone who begins in bold colors but loses them as she becomes less and less herself? Color is not strictly necessary to telling a good story. Like any element of filmmaking, color is a tool that with the right vision can be used to elevate what we see and how we see it. These are just a few ways color and costume can help to reflect identity, denote change, or mark contrast. Next week, we'll look at how a filmmaker like Edgar Wright achieves all three in a single film, and in ways most of us watching would least expect it. Until then, I'm Danny Boyd. Thank you so much for watching.
Just tell her baby's coming. Baby? B-A-B-Y, baby.
No one makes movies like Edgar Wright makes movies. Action, music, sound, editing.
How's that working out for you?
And oh, the choreography. All joined in harmony and distilled down to the smallest moment. And few of his movies show off that orchestrated ballet of film craft with more style than 2017's Baby Driver.
Oh, there you are.
But that's also what every voice on the internet talks about. And yeah, it's brilliant and legitimately worth learning from. But today, I want to look at an element of this movie that's so in your face that so often we don't even notice it. Color.
All of my movies, and Baby Driver being no exception, I'm always looking to kind of color code the characters.
Specifically the color of what Wright's characters wear.
If I close my eyes, maybe I'll feel you again.
So working with Courtney Hoffman, the costume designer, we basically picked a color per character so that character would be somebody that you could track. So in this case, Ansel is in like gray and black and white. Jamie is in red, John Hamm is in blue, Asa Gonzalez is in purple and pink, and those are their colors.
You're not meant to notice it consciously, but it's there. So why is color so useful? And why does Edgar Wright even bother?
So what is it you do?
Wright's protagonists have an aesthetic simplicity to them that makes them visually identifiable. In other words, they wear a kind of uniform. Sometimes that uniform is literal, and other times it's a red tie or a Ringer t-shirt. But with Baby Driver, Hoffman wanted to go even bolder, having come straight off the heels of Matt Ross's Captain Fantastic. The goal? If you were to dress as one of these characters for Halloween, could you, and would people recognize you for it?
How the fuck I look?
Let's start with Jamie Foxx's Bats. He's big, he's bold, he's loud, wears pure Atlanta, and the color our brains have the most visceral reaction to.
Bats! No need for intros, Doc. Everybody from the jungle to the trap, no bats.
Basically, he thinks he's the king.
I can hurt you,
but because his color is so pronounced, we're taught to associate it not only with him, but with what he stands for. Bats is dangerous and represents one of the greatest threats to Baby's plans to elope. So by the end, our association with the color is so defined that it becomes transferable to different settings and to other characters. Buddy and Darling are a little different, pulled straight from movies like Wild at Heart or True Romance, massively devoted, hugely impractical. Skirts too short, necklines too low. As Hoffman puts it, she wanted femininity to be ultra-femininity, masculinity to be ultra-masculinity.
Don't pick up.
She wears pink, he wears blue, and it's all dialed up to 11. But a character doesn't have to be bathed in a color to create an association with it. Maybe you paint the office green of somebody obsessed with money. Or you accessorize.
This shit is bananas, dog.
Which brings us to Baby himself. Unlike most movie characters, who stand out because they dress more boldly than the people around them, Baby stands out because he doesn't. Baby wears flat, colorless clothes, without textures, because at the beginning of the movie, he's young, fresh, and has yet to discover who he is. Despite being a getaway driver for a team of bank robbers, Baby isn't all good or all bad. He does crime, but isn't hardened by it or devoted to it. Dressed in black and white, he could still go in either direction. He's got the biggest arc left to go on, while everyone else is fully formed.
He wants to sit there in his car, keep his white shirt clean while the rest of us, we roll in the dirt.
But as he goes through the movie, across his own journey, Baby begins to react emotionally to what happens around him, to make his own decisions, to discover who he is and what he wants. The literal blank white slate he wears across his chest begins to transform, until by the end of the movie, it's no longer white at all.
Zebra.
Like a zebra, I guess.
I'm wearing black and white, so you can call me Debra.
Deborah wears black and white too, but those aren't really her colors. That's her living somebody else's 50s diner fantasy. Her uniform?
Lily James has sort of denim and pops of yellow.
And as Baby nears the end of his transformation, he begins to adopt Deborah's colors. But Edgar Wright's use of color in costume design isn't all about character growth or storytelling. Sometimes the reason to color code your characters is actually pretty simple.
Because in a lot of action films, especially like spy or like hitman films, they're always wearing black, and the cars are black, and the goodies and the baddies are in black. And sometimes if you get into a fight scene where both of your actors are shaven-headed and they're wearing all black, it's impossible to tell what's going on.
Hi, I'm Danny Boyd, and this is a scene in focus. Ready? So today we're looking at the Penguin Chase from The Batman, directed by Matt Reeves. There are a lot of components to this scene that make it interesting. The action, the retro sodium vapor lighting, the weather, sound design. But today I'm going to focus on just one thing. Placement of the camera. Whatever you think of the movie, the cinematography of The Batman may be its most outstanding quality.
No way.
But unlike a lot of spectacle movies, The Batman wasn't just shot to look good. Every decision Reeves and cinematographer Greg Fraser make in creating its image is made to serve its story, its characters, and the immersion of the audience. What Reeves didn't want? A movie that keeps his audience held at an arm's length.
The movie had to have a very visceral side to it, and that it happens in the visual. It's a critical part of it. We're trying to take you into an experience, visually trying to experience the movie from Batman's point of view as much as possible.
Reeves creates immersion in two ways. The first is by bringing us directly into his world. Gotham is dark, it's grungy, it rains. In other words, it evokes the moody atmospheres of its influences.
Clute, Alan Pakula, shot by Gordon Willis.
I'm
afraid so.
Chinatown.
I am sorry.
The Hand by Wong Kar-wai.
And where a lot of movies are desaturated to make their world seem bleak, the Batman goes to the blackest blacks and then combines them with a bold use of color. But it isn't just Gotham that's dirty and broken. It's the lenses themselves that we're looking at the city through.
These lenses were so messed up that essentially the edges of the frame were completely distorted. But the idea was, how can we use the texture of the lenses, the texture of film, and introduce it in a way that would make you feel the atmosphere of this place, and would also give you that sense of the subjectiveness of being in that point of view.
And that leads us to the other way Reeves creates immersion, through the subjective viewpoints of the characters and the action. In this scene, notice how every shot includes multiple elements of subject and object together. Even though the morphe of the lenses keeps some elements out of focus, we always get Batman and the phone and the DA, or all three, instead of cutting from close-up to close-up. Reeves loves creating depth like this because it places us right inside the scene instead of outside observing it. Or sometimes the main action of a scene is out of focus because a character's awareness of the situation is obscured. Or what may seem at first like a conventional tracking shot of one character turns out to be a point of view shot of someone else. In fact, POV shots and mounted shots like these are everywhere in the Batman because they're the most subjective shots out there, and they make us feel like the character and what the character is feeling. So how does this apply to the Batmobile chase? Well, with very few exceptions, nearly every camera angle in the scene is positioned where a participating character or object is, or could be. So as an audience, we're at all times either attached to one of the cars, or inside of it, either hanging off of a door, looking through a side view, peering from the back seat, the passenger seat, or always connected to someone or something that's a part of the action. Compare this to chase scenes from other Batman movies, where the majority of the shots used are objective, high in the sky, on cranes, or attached to camera cars. What's interesting about the chase scene from the Batman, though, is how much of it isn't just shot from Batman's perspective, like most of the movie. Beginning with this shot of the Batmobile firing up for the first time, we're offered largely the perspective and breadth of awareness of the other characters in the scene. Kinda like... And once the chase scene begins, we hone in on our villain and his reaction shots. We stay with his limited awareness before the Batmobile emerges from the fire. We get these great mounted shots inside his car as he flips around. And at the end of the scene, we get some of the most instantly iconic POV shots ever. Here, here, and here. This is the only car chase scene in the movie, and one of the film's highest velocity action sequences in general, but Reeves still manages to apply the same visual techniques and tenets here that are so integral to the core experience of the rest of the film. And this philosophy of immersiveness extends to less visual elements of the Batman as well. Batman is narrating the beginning of a movie.
2 years of nights have turned me into a nocturnal animal.
He's writing in his journal. When Nirvana starts playing in this scene, it turns out to be diegetic. I'll have another video later on delving deeper into subjectivity and objectivity in movies and how they're achieved. But for now, just remember, if you're making a movie, drama and action aren't just about the relationships between characters or objects or the world. It's about how you choose to present those relationships to the people on the other end. Whether it's in a chase scene, a hallway gunfight, or just two characters in a room talking. I'm Danny Boyd. This was The Batman. Thank you so much for watching.
Look out there. Out there is the perfect lap. No mistakes. Every gear change, every corner.
In a scene from James Mangold's Ford v Ferrari, Christian Bale's Ken Miles sits with his son on an airport runway, contemplating the perfect lap. And while in a movie full of heart-pounding, high-speed race sequences, the composition of a character scene like this one might appear routine on its surface, to capture the scene on camera, cinematographer Phaedon Papamichael had just 20 minutes to film 7 setups worth of shots and coverage, all during that magic hour of dusk light. Ford v Ferrari is a film inspired by the true story of Ford's legendary head-to-head against Ferrari at the 1966 Le Mans 24-hour endurance race. The movie also marks the 5th collaboration between Papamichael and Mangold, a relationship showing no signs of ever slowing down. From a cinematography standpoint, Papamichael approached Ford v Ferrari's famously practical high-speed racing scenes and its intimate character scenes under the same philosophy: to not preconceive, and to embrace what's in front of you. As Mangold put it in an interview with Variety magazine, Papamichael is very responsive. It's a process of plan, but then watch what's happening in the moment, and adapt, revise, and respond to what you're seeing. In the case of the film's driving sequences, Mangold and Papamichael used up-close wide-angle lenses and placed their stunt drivers outside of the vehicles in order to give free rein to the scope and the spontaneity of Bale's performance. But in shooting the perfect lap scene at dusk, the ability to adapt and revise in the moment was imperative. Filming alongside active runways, Papamichael and Mangold were restricted not only by time, but by the equipment they were even allowed to use on the day. They couldn't risk high winds carrying objects into the flight paths of nearby planes, and with only 20 minutes, minimal equipment, and no ability to control distant light sources, Papamichael improvised his lighting by using that glowing number 8 on the runway, which production had built from a sky panel, a box, and some fabric, just so he could get enough light onto the faces of his actors. Papamichael later told Variety, "We planned it and went for it. It was really stressful, but we knew we had it." When choosing to shoot out in the wild, you surrender what control is offered by green screens and sound stages to greater forces. You might plan out every gear change and every corner. You can prepare your shots, your technical elements, your actors. But when it comes time for Phaedon Papamichael to capture a scene on camera, he knows there's no such thing as the perfect lap. He embraces the unpredictability of filmmaking, that unknowingness, that discovery that only exists in the moment, in the throes of a shot, when all you thought you knew is passing you by at 150 miles an hour. This is Christopher Nolan's Tenet. And this is Tenet's protagonist.
I'm the protagonist.
He doesn't have a name. He's got swagger and charm, and he seems to know his way around a kitchen pretty well. But an identity? Well, that's a black box even he doesn't know until the film's end. Because Tenet is a film committed to secrecy.
Policy is to suppress. It can't possibly do you any good to know that right now.
Don't try to understand it.
Need to know and you don't. This is knowledge divided. It's unknowable.
Ignorance is our ammunition.
And that's half a problem. The other half?
What?
Tenet's dialogue is a little hard to hear. You might have heard this before. It's Bane's original dialogue recording from The Dark Knight Rises before being redubbed and remixed for the final film.
Calm down, Doctor. Now is not the time for fear. That comes later.
This use of ADR is extremely rare for Nolan, who prefers the authenticity of production sound, but that also means that every sound on set, like wind and the camera, compete directly with dialogue when the film is being mixed. And that's one of the reasons the characters in Interstellar are notoriously difficult to hear. But it isn't the only reason. Nolan himself has claimed that Interstellar's many dialogue-heavy scenes being overpowered by environment and score was intentional. He encourages viewers to think of dialogue as a kind of sound effect, blending in with the atmosphere, or in other words,
Don't try to understand it. Feel it.
Regarding the question of Tenet sound specifically, some sound designers have suggested that this phenomenon is the consequence of new technology that's granting people like Nolan and his engineers vast suites to edit every minute detail of a soundscape.
In this process, dialogue can lose priority, mixed low in a thick wash of what sound mixer Matthew Price referred to as track overload.
But why does this matter?
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
We know dialogue doesn't need to be articulate to still make a cinematic or emotional impact, or abundant to make us feel connected to a world, its characters, or its events. Except that maybe for Nolan, it does. Nolan's dialogue plays a very important role in his films. As a vehicle, it's used to deliver vast amounts of complex information to us, his audience, and it does this with the help of a guide. Elliot Page's Ariadne, for instance, in 2010's Inception, is our connection into a convoluted reality of dreams within dreams within dreams. She is our guide, an audience surrogate intelligent enough to process and then extrapolate from the information she receives about the world and its logic and its rules, but new enough to it to ask for answers to questions we would have. By the way, these kinds of expository conversations often associated with Nolan are particularly prevalent in the movies Nolan wrote without a writing partner. But while Ariadne serves a role that's distinct from Inception's central character, Cobb, Tenet's protagonist fills both roles. He's at once the lightning rod for the majority of the film's exposition, and the primary driving force of the film's action. And as with past films, Nolan chooses to accommodate both these key functions through dialogue.
I need an assist to Mumbai. I need to get to Sanjay Singh.
The Mumbai break-in? That doesn't happen at random. Neither does this airport heist or this car chase. These scenes are the direct consequence of information provided to the protagonist in one scene, followed by a verbal choice made by the protagonist to then act on that information in the next scene. Problem is, when Nolan's dialogue gets masked, at times literally, behind sound design that takes a key to decipher, our connection as an audience to vital information and to characters' decision-making gets locked away within it. As a result, events seem to unfold like a roller coaster, seemingly without cause or effect, just spectacle. It's not that there is no story, even if it sometimes seems that way. There is. It's just buried in the mix. But Tenet's preoccupation with obscuring information has implications beyond our connection to world and plot. It can affect the way we connect emotionally with character, and this is where the protagonist's lack of an identity comes in.
I was thinking a lot of Sergio Leone westerns, like with Clint Eastwood as the man with no name. I really wanted to tap into that kind of great tradition of the anonymous protagonist.
Everything we know about our hero can be garnered from a single scene, the film's opening opera house raid. This is not a shortcoming. Through action alone, Nolan is able to demonstrate that this character is brave, knowledgeable, and unyieldingly committed to his job. But these are just traits. We don't know his history, who his friends are, who he loves. And that's unusual, even for a Nolan movie. In Inception, the film's emotional arc is centered on the death of Cobb's wife, whose repeated intrusions play an enormous role in the rising tensions of the film. In Interstellar, we're introduced to Cooper as a father before anything else, and the growing distance between him and his children ties into many of Interstellar's themes of isolation, humanity, and love, albeit clumsily at times. Even Memento, a film in which information about the protagonist is similarly withheld, manages to provide an emotional through line. Leonard's goal isn't nebulous, his search for his wife's killer is tangible and deeply empathetic. Tenet's hero isn't given an emotional anchor. His individuality lies solely in his role as an operative, the de facto savior of the world, the protagonist.
I think there's something really compelling about jumping into a story and being told essentially to concentrate on the here and now. And so deliberately not naming him, not including any of that information about how he might have arrived there. Hopefully it draws attention to that idea and keeps people really focused on the here and now.
So does it? Or does leaving answers to these kinds of mysteries for the film's end sever a connection between what we see and what we feel up until that point? What do you think? If you think it does, then Nolan might have a solution to help with some of those sound mix issues too. Watch it again. Like a temporal pincer operation, go through the movie a second time, knowing what you didn't know then, and it's a fundamentally different experience. Thanks to a recontextualization of events, the film's dialogue and ideas and relationships become exceedingly easier to extract, to understand, and to connect with. Admittedly, seeing Tenet twice might have been a lot for Nolan to ask when insisting that the film be released in theaters in the midst of a global pandemic, but tell me what you thought with another go, and maybe with the closed captions turned on.
You guys sound check?
Yeah. No, not yet. We're going on it.
Margaret sound checked yet? Have you sound checked yet?
No, not looking forward to it. Terrified. Half my shit's broken.
This is the quietest room on Earth. Located at Microsoft's headquarters in Redmond, Washington, the anechoic chamber is so quiet that background noise is measured in negative decibels, and mere minutes inside have been known to induce panic, disorientation, and even auditory hallucinations. Blood, bone, breath. The only sound you'll hear in the chamber, and others like it, is you. But despite its sheer deprivation, there is one thing that an anechoic chamber cannot be adequately likened to.
You know, I think hearing people don't really understand that this goes way beyond the actual physical condition of deafness. It's a distinct culture. And in that, and under the umbrella of deaf culture, there's many subcultures. But deaf culture with a capital D is a very real thing. And that's the first huge learning curve. We are very hearing centric. We're very able-bodied thinkers. We think of ASL as an interpretation of English. It is not. American Sign Language is a different language. It has nothing to do with English.
That was Sound of Metal director Darius Marder, whose 2019 feature debut sought to explore a slice of that culture on film, and as authentically as possible illustrate a young man's transition into it through immersive filmmaking, disciplined performances, and a rare measure of human awareness. The concept for Sound of Metal was born a decade and a half ago in conversations between Marder and fellow screenwriter Derek Cienfrance, a former metal drummer who left his band after signs of tinnitus started to set in. At the time, Cienfrance was already half done developing his experience into his own film called Metalhead, featuring members from the band Jucifer, a nomadic metal duo known for living and touring full-time out of an RV. But when the project was abandoned, Marder adopted the premise and raised it into Sound of Metal and the story of Ruben Stone, a fictional drummer in a metal duo of his own who rapidly becomes deaf.
That's what? In the left ear, it came in at 24%.
Okay.
That is not good.
Yeah, I see that. So what can we do about it? How do I get it back?
But for Marder and his team, capturing that experience on film was a tremendous challenge, one less of sight than of sound. And that's where sound designer Nicolas Becker comes in.
Bonjour, mon nom est Nicolas Becker, je suis bruiteur de formation et je me suis mis aussi à faire du sound design, aussi un travail de composition. un travail de captation de field recording.
On their first meeting, Becker and Marder actually visited an anechoic chamber in Paris. They used it as a starting point to discuss the internal sensation of external silence and set to work creating as authentic a soundscape as possible.
My first idea was to go to something very naturalistic. So the idea is that we try to actually understand physically from the people who had this experience, what was the inner feeling, like the body feeling of it.
When consulting the deaf community, Marder and Becker chose to specifically learn about the experiences of individuals who were not born deaf, to best match the life and perspective of their hero. Diegetically, that meant a complex mix of noise and quiet. The sound of drums, blenders, traffic are all suffocated through Ruben's point of view. And as Ruben first grapples with his loss of hearing, that point of view is reinforced by Marder's camera. When Ruben fills a shot, his auditory perspective takes over, and words to a hearing audience are drowned out. But when the camera takes a step back to a spectator's distance, like passers-by, we can hear again.
He's having trouble even communicating with me.
These techniques are further paired with Becker's minimalist score, which was composed for an instrument called a crystal bachet, a glass organ embedded with metal rods whose varying lengths and weights produce an eerie, resonant drone when brushed, quite literally the sound of metal. Of course, any emphasis on authenticity in a film also places enormous pressure on the performer. Riz Ahmed, who plays Ruben, was tasked with learning American Sign Language and drumming in the months leading up to filming. Marder made it clear that he was going to provide Ahmed with no safety nets. When filming the raucous concert scenes shot in front of live audiences, Marder's philosophy was simple.
I said, look, if you suck, you suck. You're going to be as good as you get.
A creed pushed to an even greater extreme with the film's use of language. Marder demanded Ahmed learn to comprehend ASL beyond just what the script contained.
I also said, you're going to be in a deaf community for, as a character, your character has lived in a deaf community for 4 to 6 months. So you have to learn ASL to the degree that Ruben would know it. You can't just learn your lines. You have to be able to improvise. It's disrespectful to the deaf community. You have to show up with a command of that language.
Riz Ahmed's ASL coach, Jeremy Lee Stone, claimed that Ahmed refused to use textbooks, opting instead to learn the language through conversation, just as Ruben would.
The first day you were here, you remind me of an owl. Owl?
Marder also insisted that Sound of Metal be screened to accommodate deaf audiences.
The film is captioned tonight, so it's not just subtitled, it's captioned. And really this is the beginning of an experiment of bringing together two distinct cultures and enjoying a film together. And that means that we all experience the film slightly differently, but we do it together in the same room.
When the film premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2019, the subtitles were hard-coded into the reel, and the only moments where captions don't appear in the film are instances when Ruben's perspective takes over, before he's become fully acquainted with ASL. For a hearing audience, these scenes become some of the most affecting, left like Ruben in open water without a guide, immersed in a community and culture and language very different from the one we take for granted every day of our lives. The hard-coded captions have since been removed, but Marder encourages audiences to keep them on.
Everybody here shares in the belief that being deaf is not a handicap. Not something to fix. It's pretty important around here.
Those are words spoken by Rubin's mentor, Joe, played by Paul Raci, himself a child of deaf adults and a lifetime ASL interpreter for the LA court system. I think what truly sets Sound of Metal apart from too many other films that struggle to tackle similar themes and stories about change and loss is the way that it chooses to fold deafness into a broader narrative. In Sound of Metal, deafness is treated less as an obstacle than as a catalyst, fuel to explore an equally potent influence on the story: addiction.
My name's Ruben. I'm an addict. I have 4 years clean now.
Recovery plays an essential role in Ruben's arc, a former addict of quote-unquote everything, as well as that of his partner Lou, who has previously committed self-harm, likely linked to a traumatic family history. But whatever demons the two battle in an effort to help themselves is outweighed by each one's mission to help the other at any cost. Lou helps Ruben into a deaf sober house, a community of people who are importantly there to address their addiction, not their deafness.
It's very important, if you want to be here, to understand that we're looking for a solution to this, not this.
And as Ruben's journey develops within and without that community, he begins to come to terms with what he has and hasn't got, to cut ties with the path he long imagined for himself, and finds peace and beauty and quiet, culminating in a scene where dialogue plays second fiddle to nonverbal communication, where emotion is universal, where one journey can end, and a new one can be anything that we choose to imagine. Hi, I'm Danny Boyd, and the day is February 14th, 1991. You've never seen Jonathan Demme's The Silence of the Lambs. You don't know that in a staggering 13 months, it'll become one of just 3 films in history to win the top 5 Oscars at the Academy Awards. As a matter of fact, you don't know anything, except what the friend who's dragged you down to your local AMC to see it has told you. It's a scary movie about a serial killer named Hannibal Lecter who eats people, and this other guy who makes human bodysuits out of his victims. Fun. But now imagine you arrive and the concession line is a bit long. You rush into the theater 2 minutes into the film, and you see this. A woman running in the woods. But remember, scary movie, right? So maybe you fill in a few details of your own. Because how many times have you seen this exact shot in a horror movie? Or what about this shot of someone trying desperately to open up their car door at night to make their escape from an impending threat? On their surface, these are tropes, and from them are born preconceptions about certain images linked with singular contexts within a genre, when in reality, Jodie Foster's Clarice Starling is actually completing an obstacle course at an FBI training facility outside of Quantico. She's actually investigating a murder and breaking into an old car to find evidence. These shots aren't meant to trick you. Their context within The Silence of the Lambs is perfectly clear, but director Jonathan Demme has put them in for a reason, and in their own small way, they represent everything brilliant about this movie. The Silence of the Lambs asks us to forget everything we've seen before, everything we thought we knew, about the genre, about its characters, about what it means to be an Oscar contender. Don't measure this film against any of that.
Read Marcus Aurelius. Of each particular thing, ask, what is it in itself? What is its nature?
Now, I won't harp on as to whether The Silence of the Lambs is really a horror movie or whether it should be classified as psychological thriller, but on whatever shelf you put it, the fact is, before 1992, no movie as horrific had ever won the Oscar for Best Picture, let alone swept for Best Actress, Best Actor, Best Director, and Best Screenplay. And why not? Jonathan Demme's film has all the makings of an esteemed Oscar-pleasing Hollywood production, minus the genre.
You see a lot, Doctor.
Jodie Foster's performance is a masterclass in naturalism. Her character's fears, strengths, insecurities, responses to her environment are each played out reactively and on instinct. Clarice Starling abandons the tropey preconceptions of women in the genre in place of someone real, someone motivated not by plot or archetype, but by her immediate circumstances and her past traumas. Someone endowed with the resolve to overcome obstacles and to later help others in the film who can't.
Now then, tell me, what did Miggs say to you? Multiple Miggs in the next cell. He hissed at you. What did he say?
But where Foster is remarkably understated, and her Clarice remarkably human, Anthony Hopkins' Hannibal Lecter is a different story completely. Hopkins' deliveries are clinically precise, spoken in a voice that, according to him, was 1/3 Katharine Hepburn, 1/3 Truman Capote, and 1/3 Stanley Kubrick's HAL 9000.
Hello, Dave.
Good evening, Clarice.
Hannibal as a character is driven not by his own emotions or humanity, but by a fascination for and constant study of the emotions of others. Hopkins' physicality is at the same time inviting and predatory, almost reptilian, fiercely calculated, as though every word Hopkins speaks, every motion he makes, is performed by deliberate cognitive volition, not as a reaction, and not by instinct.
Anthrax Island. That was an especially nice touch, Clarice. Yours?
You can't quite get a firm read on Hannibal because, well, he's too busy reading you. When asked about the character of Hannibal Lecter, Silence of the Lambs screenwriter Ted Talley once said, "The more you explain him, the less he is. I don't want to know that somebody hurt his puppy when he was 8 years old. I don't want him to be conventionally motivated. Less is more." And Talley wasn't kidding either. Across the film's 118-minute runtime, Anthony Hopkins is on screen for just 16 of them, one of the shortest Best Actor Oscar wins of all time. It's an unprecedented performance that some critics have even suggested could have very well unbalanced the movie had it been reveled in for any longer. But the genius of Hannibal from a screenwriting perspective is how his presence in The Silence of the Lambs manages to spill over those 16 minutes. Lecter himself is preceded by his own mythologized reputation. The first scene in Hannibal's cell may be when Clarice first meets him, but it isn't the scene that we're first introduced to him.
Sit down.
This is
Yes, sir.
Jack Crawford's office.
I remember you from my seminar at UVA.
5 minutes into the movie, where Demi and Talley give us a deliberately suggestive understanding
The psychiatrist Hannibal Lecter.
of what this character has done,
Hannibal the cannibal.
what makes him dangerous,
Believe me, you don't want Hannibal Lecter inside your head.
and what he is.
And what is that?
Oh, he's a monster.
It's just enough to form an image, but not enough to fill it in with the full truth.
He's past the others. The last cell.
Each inmate that Starling passes on the way to Hannibal's cell is more maniacal and frenetic than the last. By all accounts, Hannibal should exceed them all. But he doesn't. Hannibal Lecter is calm and collected, standing at attention in a neat, form-fitting jumpsuit. A Hopkins idea, by the way. And it isn't that Hopkins or his portrayal of Hannibal undermines anything that's been said about him so far. After all, he has killed people and eaten them. Rather, it's that the character defines for itself the nature of the monster in a horror movie.
What is its nature?
Through expression, through physicality, a great actor can convey self-possession, discomfort, curiosity, nervousness, intimidation, fear, or subtle combinations of each. But as immensely powerful as the human face is in communicating, the language of physical expression is still a primitive one. One of the great boons of a novel is the inherent ability it has to devote space to internal thought, insight into the way external actions and words impact the emotional psyches of a character. One of Ted Talley and Jonathan Demme's greatest challenges when making The Silence of the Lambs, and in turn one of their greatest successes, was finding a way to paint Clarice Starling's internal experiences onto the screen. In particular, her experience as a woman in a male-dominated workplace. The power of eyes and the human gaze completely pervade The Silence of the Lambs. Through Demi's use of a subjective camera, much of Lambs is presented to its audience directly through Starling's eyes, and we see firsthand the way Clarice is viewed by the men around her, as either an object of desire or one of contempt. But Demi doesn't want you to just witness these objectifications, these preconceptions, like some bystander. Characters speak and glare directly into the camera, directly at Starling, directly at us. Lecter's gaze pierces a bit deeper than the rest, though. Like a viper, Hopkins never blinks, except at the most deliberate moments, when doing so feels almost hypnotic. We can actually track the moment Lecter has begun to creep inside Starling's head by tracking Demi and cinematographer Tak Fujimoto's camera work, when things transition from conventional over-the-shoulder shots to Demi's signature POVs.
Closer.
This motif ultimately comes to a head at the film's climax, though, with the omniscient eyes of Buffalo Bill, a man able to view Clarice without restraint, social or otherwise, rendering Clarice not only emotionally, but now physically powerless, trapped under the gaze of a man she can't even see. It's an expertly conceived cinematic and narrative through line, and one that can be truly terrifying. Earlier, I mentioned that The Silence of the Lambs won at the Oscars a staggering 13 months after it was released. That's because most Best Picture winners throughout history have been released after August, so that they might still be remembered come award season. But not this movie. The Silence of the Lambs won on its own merits, and forced the Academy in 1992 to look past what they thought they knew about what a prestigious Hollywood film should look like. Most genre films face an uphill climb to Oscar recognition, often undervalued and underrepresented at the Academy Awards. Maybe that's because the Oscars don't ask each one what is it in itself, measuring each instead against a preconception of a genre that simply doesn't fit inside their particular mold. Every so often something pushes through, or maybe is let through, but Jonathan Demme's The Silence of the Lambs is just one piece of evidence that great cinema, great performances, themes, and world-class filmmaking is not tied to genre. It's tied only to the brilliant people who tell the story that they want to tell. Yeah. I'm Danny Boyd. Thank you so much for watching. Hi, I'm Danny Boyd, and this is Cinemastix, a celebration of film and film form. Okay, check it out. You're cruising over the Atlantic. You swoop down onto a busy Miami crowd, push through the front doors of a club, circle around the room, and land at the booth. 2 minutes long, one continuous take, except that it isn't. Let's watch it again. Helicopter shot across the ocean, crane shot down into a dolly push, through the door, and onto a Hollywood soundstage. 3 shots, 2 cuts. Did you spot him? Those were the opening minutes of The Birdcage,
Wine?
shot in the mid-90s by Emmanuel Lubezki,
Hurry up, I've got to get back down there to rehearsal.
whose illusions of sustained long shots have become practically modern legend in Hollywood. And yeah, his work over time has become more sophisticated, more diverse, and more difficult to parse, but here, the goal wasn't spectacle.
Let's start with the premise.
The choice to shoot long takes, touring tracking shots, and wide-frame scenes was to tap into the parentage of the film itself.
Something starts in your pelvis and works its way towards your heart.
Because The Birdcage is based off a play and directed by one of the most acclaimed film and stage directors of all time.
What'd I do with Albert? I mean, how do you make Albert into a housewife?
Well, you'd have to send Albert away for a few days.
Are you nuts? You try sending Albert away.
But Dad, we've got to get rid of a few things around here.
What? What things?
Elaine and I loved Cajo Folle for years and years because it's one of the great plots.
No. You take your knife.
It's about family.
And you smear.
Men smear. Smear, that's it.
And we couldn't get the rights, and we couldn't get the rights, and then we did.
That was The Birdcage's director, Mike Nichols. He and his creative partner, Elaine May, practically redefined improvisational comedy in the 1950s and 60s.
It is a moral issue.
Moral
And
issue.
to me, that's always so much more interesting than a real issue.
Yeah.
You know, because there's a fiber to it.
That's right.
You can feel
Something
it.
to
Yes.
follow in the papers.
But it wouldn't be until The Birdcage, in 1996, after 2 long and affluent independent careers in Hollywood,
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me.
that the two would reunite for their first cinematic foray together. May writing,
Chewing gum helped me think.
Sweetie, you're wasting your gum.
and Nichols directing.
John Wayne.
Oh, God. Couldn't we start with someone easier?
And although The Birdcage is based off a play,
Howdy, man.
Nichols and May took much of their inspiration from the French film adaptation released in 1978.
Oui, John Wayne, tu descends de cheval.
Names were changed, locations moved, politics were recontextualized,
Actually, it's perfect. I just never realized John Wayne walked like that.
but at its roots, The Birdcage remains fundamentally one thing:
Armand!
a farce.
Albert! Are you trying to ruin me?
And that meant it needed enough space to play out its action
Hit me.
and its comedy,
I don't think I get it.
Try more gum.
Albert.
sometimes together, and sometimes
I never wear shoes because they make me fall down.
a little delayed.
Call me.
Perfect. What is this, sludge?
Yes, it's sludge. I thought I'd make a nice change from coffee.
Bag lady. Good morning, Agador.
Good morning.
Shooting wide allows for all the characters in the scene to play out their actions without cutting. And like in a stage play, Nichols would use a set's natural depth to keep less pertinent characters in the background rather than out of frame.
I don't understand.
Yes, you do.
No.
Then when it's finally time for a long shot to end, they're expertly broken by either a match cut or by a new character entering the scene.
I think you should come downstairs. She's trying to take his chewing gum away.
It's amazing what a director can achieve with just one angle
It's a wonderful show.
It's the most intelligent show on television.
or one setup.
Plays are about where on stage everybody is. When you have everybody in the right place on stage, the scene can happen. And by the way, if they're in the wrong place, the scene can't happen. That's partly what rehearsal is about.
Like in the theater, rehearsal was a huge deal for Nichols, who practiced with his cast for weeks before production began. That's unusual for a film, and it was in rehearsal that Nichols would allow his cast to improvise and adapt the script that they would shoot with later based on choices made in the moment. So when it came time to actually shoot the movie, everybody had a complete understanding of what precisely they wanted to do, how they would move, what they would say, and where they would say it.
We'd like the champagne now.
When you want to shoot your action wide and continuous, this kind of preparation is everything, because it means you don't have to cut things up in the edit because it didn't work. Of course, no matter how much you rehearse, you still can't control everything, and you ultimately have to hope for the best.
Well, certainly in a movie, that to me is the essence of making a movie, that you prepare like crazy and then you wait to discover what happens. Every day is a surprise. That's the joy of making movies. You have to hope it's a good surprise and that they got it on film.
Wrong response?
I'm not sure. Take it from the top.
On any given shot during production, Nichols had a rule. Once he was satisfied with the take, he would let his actors go off script.
Dance, you do fussy, 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 you do Martha Graham, Martha Graham, Martha Graham, or Twyla, 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 or Michael Kidd, Michael Kidd, Michael Kidd, Michael Kidd, or Madonna, Madonna, Madonna.
But you keep it all inside.
Sometimes even the best off-the-cuff moments don't always fit the story. But when the surprise is right, the improv makes it in.
Perhaps one more schnecken for the road, do you mind? When the schnecken beckons.
That was improvised.
You're going to the cemetery with your toothbrush.
How Egyptian.
That was improvised.
Shut up!
And this?
Here's the note for Catherine. Go put it on the downstairs door. Shut up!
Well, that was an accident. But pay attention to the way Robin Williams fights to save the scene afterwards and keep himself from breaking up.
It's okay. We're all right. It's fine. Just shut up, goddammit. It's all right. Stop crying. Goddamn you. What are you standing there for? Go. Go. She'll be here in a minute. Go. Damn it. Fuck the shrimp.
There's something about a group of people looking at something, all apprehending something unspoken, that is very exciting to me. It's what I love in the theater at its best, and it's what I love in movies, that it's like you describe the space around something, and the thing that in the middle that is not referred to is apparent as a result.
There's so much more to say on The Birdcage. Its cultural significance, its dense satire, but for all of that, there's simply no substitute for the real thing. So if you're in the mood for something smart and funny and sweet, or you just miss Robin Williams as much as I do, go watch The Birdcage. And Joe Maltby, thank you so much for the recommendation.
Mr. Rocky Balboa to see you, sir.
Hi, I'm Danny Boyd, and this is Cinemastix, a celebration of film and film form. When John G. Avildsen was initially offered the job to direct the first Rocky movie, he immediately turned it down, not giving a damn about the subject matter, until he was convinced 3 pages into the script when this happens.
Hey, your old man did pretty good tonight. Why weren't you there, huh? You should have seen me. You guys hungry?
Stallone still has those turtles, by the way.
Here you go. Here you go.
Because at its core, Rocky isn't a boxing movie.
When do I fight again?
Maybe 2 weeks.
Rocky fights because he has to, because he isn't good at anything else.
Because I can't sing or dance. Hey, yo.
Halfway into the movie, Rocky's offered the biggest fight on the planet.
You'd be interested in fighting Apollo Creed for the World Heavyweight Championship?
And what does he say?
No.
And at the very end of the film, after going 15 rounds on a world stage, what does Rocky want more than anything else in the world? But I'm getting ahead of myself. Here's why Rocky Balboa in 1976 is more sincere, complex, and endearing than you remember. It's important to understand that Stallone wrote his character. He wrote the story, the screenplay, and he refused to sell the movie until the studio agreed to let him star in it.
Tell me, Rocky, just between us, where did you get the name Italian Stallion?
I invented that about 8 years ago when I was eating dinner.
And as a result, there's authenticity at the core of Rocky's character that can't be imitated.
You got a friend for you. Oh, Rock. How you doing?
What the hell are those?
Oh, those are the domestic turtles. The one on the top is cuff and the other guy is link, and the rest of them are marble.
Yeah, they make good soup. Anyway, look.
What's great about an actor and a director understanding their character this well is that they're able to show off everything we need to know about who this character is with a single shot. Rocky saunters into a room because he's self-assertive, whistles to himself because he's generally high-spirited, relies on physical aids because he can't trust his brain, will fight to hold his temper in even when he's feeling angry, but will ultimately brute force his way through a problem instead of re-strategizing or asking for help.
It ain't your locker no more.
And sure, you could reduce it all down to hypermasculinity.
Talk about ain't my locker. It's been my locker for 6 years. Where's my gear?
Mickey told me to bag it, hang it.
There's clearly something more going on under the surface. For instance, here's how Rocky talks to the girl he likes. Like he does every day,
Cold night.
he starts with a bad joke.
Good night to catch pneumonia, you know?
Then he tries to ask her out.
Want to go to the basketball game?
Not very well. But even though all he wants to do is open up to her about the day he's having,
Tough day today, you know? They took my locker away. I had that locker for about 6 years, but don't bother me none.
he just can't seem to drop his tough guy front.
Combination. I must have had 20 bucks taken out of there in the past 6 years, you know? Doesn't matter, who cares, you know?
So he self-deflects.
Hey, bird. Hey, look who's here. Look who's here. The giant worm.
And then reverts to square one to try again tomorrow.
I want to go home, make up a joke. I'm going to tell you a new joke tomorrow, okay? Good night, Adrian.
Good night, Rocky.
Rocky is flawed, but he knows it. He never gives up, but he can't seem to break out of his same old patterns, no matter how hard he tries.
Yo, Adrian. These are the exotic animals I was telling you about. These are my friends, Cuff and Link.
I sold him to you.
Sure, I know you sold them to me. Remember you were working at that pet shop, huh? First day you was there and I came.
And this is what I love about Rocky and Adrian as characters. They're both trapped in shells that only the other can break.
I think we make a real sharp couple of coconuts. I'm dumb and you're shy. What do you think, huh?
Like Cuff and Link, they need each other.
She's got gaps, I got gaps. Together we fill gaps. I don't know.
Oh.
And so, when the right circumstances finally align,
Get out of the house! Go out and enjoy your freaking life!
Rocky builds up the courage to ask Adrian out as best he can.
How about maybe you and I, maybe we'll go out together, get something to eat. I don't know, maybe laugh a little bit, who knows, you know?
And Adrian builds up the courage to agree as best she can.
We're gonna have a good time.
Which gives us this scene.
Yo, it looks kind of quiet, you know?
I think it's closed.
No, I think maybe we're just early or something like that, you know?
You!
Yo!
We're closed.
What?
Originally, their date was written to feature a rink full of background actors, but production couldn't afford it. So Stallone just rewrote the scene like this.
Oh, man. It was never too smart. He says to me, you weren't born much of a brain, you know, so,
And it's since become one of the most iconic in the franchise.
Don't fall! Don't fall! Hey, that was terrific. I'm pretty good at this. You like the way I skate?
This isn't the only instance of Stallone adapting Rocky on the fly to account for budget restraints.
Don't you leave town, huh?
Rocky's robe being too big for him? That wasn't intentional. So Stallone integrated the mistake into the script.
Hey, Adrian, you don't think this robe here is too baggy, you know?
Good luck.
Mr. Jergens, the poster's wrong.
For this scene,
What do you mean?
the night before the fight,
Well, I'm wearing white pants with a red stripe.
that was an actual mistake made by the props department. But because it was too late,
It doesn't really matter, does it?
we got this.
Sure you're gonna give us a great show.
A scene underscoring the futility of Rocky's hope to ever rise above his own station. Director John Avildsen called Rocky a love story and a character study. As heroes, Adrian's arc is maybe the most clear. She starts out debilitatingly shy, wants to speak up for herself but can't,
Adrian, I want you to go downstairs and clean all the cat cages. They're a mess.
lets Rocky in, finds it in herself to stand up to a verbally abusive brother,
I take care of you, Paulie! I don't know you nothing!
then asks Rocky to move in together.
You want roommate?
Absolutely.
But Rocky's not so different. He starts out the movie taking abuse in and out of the ring,
You're a bum! You know that? You're a bum!
tries to stand up for himself but can't,
Okay, I'm gonna tell you. Because you had the talent to become a good fighter. And instead of that, you became a leg breaker. Some cheap, second-rate loan shark.
To living?
It's a waste of life.
lets Adrian in, and then finds it in himself to let down his guard and open up to somebody emotionally for the first time.
You know, I said that stuff on TV didn't bother me none.
Yeah?
did.
In fact, one of the greatest scenes in the movie, and according to Stallone the most important, is this long take of Rocky walking into his apartment, admitting his insecurities,
Can't do it.
laying down beside Adrian,
Don't say that.
and acknowledging what he needs.
Come on, Adrian, it's true. I was nobody.
That if he can just go the distance with Creed,
I'm gonna know for the first time in my life, see? That I weren't just another bum from the neighborhood.
this scene, by the way, is the longest single shot in the entire movie, at 2.5 minutes, longer than the film's credits. The producers wanted to cut it to save time during production, but Stallone insisted, and was given just one take to get it right. He did.
Pick up 2 yards from Schneider and a gram from Capoli, right?
No. 2 yards from Capoli and a gram from Schneider.
2
okay?
yards.
Write it down,
2 yards.
okay?
Yeah, I got it. Yo, Adrian, it's me, Rocky. Rocky, you know? Listen, I don't know what to say, because I ain't never talked to no door before, you know? See that nose? That nose ain't never been broken. 64 fights. I've had guys busted on it. I had guys chewing on it, twisting it, punching it. I mean, whack, boom. These guys are hitting my nose all the time. Never broke. I'm very proud of that. It's not rare. That's rare. Oh, wait. I just want to say hi to my girlfriend, okay?
Yeah.
Yo, Adrian, me, Rocky.
Since I was a child, when I was young and wild, nobody could ever tell me there was nothing to overwhelm me. I thought I was cool when I left school. Took some time for me to realize I don't need this disguise. Baby, come, let's move on.
Who wrote?
Pulp Fiction.
Pulp Fiction.
Pulp Fiction.
Tarantino.
A friend of mine, Roger Avery,
Working with writing partner Roger Avery.
And the Oscar goes to
Delivered an Oscar-winning script
Quentin Tarantino, Roger Avery for Pulp Fiction.
with Pulp Fiction.
And at that time, Quentin and I, we collaborated on everything.
but then
suddenly all the trappings come in, the business, there's money. You kind of carve out a little piece of yourself, producers and agents, to make space for the little piece of them that you fill in that hole with. But at the time, I would give Quentin anything he asked for.
Hey, I'm Danny Boyd, and in 1995, two people won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for Pulp Fiction.
This has been a very strange year.
Quentin Tarantino.
You know what?
And to his left, waiting for him to finish,
my wife Gretchen, who I love more than anything in the world,
is Roger Avery,
and I really have to take a pee right now, so I'm gonna go. Thank you.
whom you don't really hear about much today.
At all, really.
Of course, that's got a lot to do with a bit of drama surrounding this little title card right here, which we'll come back to. But at the end of it all, here's what I really wanted to know.
Tell me up there.
You've got two writers.
Let's count our guy.
And one of the most influential films ever made.
So that means it could be up to 5 guys up there?
So,
possible. We should have fucking shotguns.
Who wrote what?
Hey, keep chilling.
We sat around, we started thinking, well, what can we do? Like, how can we get a film made?
Okay, so to answer this question, we need to back up a little bit.
Let's go.
South Bay, LA, circa 1990-ish. Two video clerks want desperately to make a movie.
So Quentin and I thought, okay, so it's easier to make a short film than a long film. We knew that.
Right, so they hatched this plan.
Thought if we get a bunch of filmmakers together, we can all make similar films. We can put them together like an anthology.
And that's how they came up with Pulp Fiction.
We were like, oh, we'll do a whole bunch of short stories, and each of us will direct one.
I had an idea for a movie, and it was,
This is Tarantino.
Cliche, guy's supposed to take out the gangster's wife, but don't touch her. We've all seen that a million times. That's the earliest idea I had for a sequence that I've ever done. I came up with that sequence when I was about 24, and I never wrote any more. I never even knew what happened after that, but I wrote that sequence. And so when I came up with my Pulp Fiction story, where the whole idea is to take cliched stories and put them in, I go, oh, well, let me expand that one. That'll be great.
And so eventually that would become the first story of the three main narratives.
3 crime stories.
To comprise Pulp Fiction.
Kind of like the stories you've seen a zillion times before, but I was just going to take them different ways. Let real life intrude on genre.
And that would be followed by Avery's story.
And I wrote the Gold Watch sequence.
Right. So the whole Bruce Willis part with Butch and Zed, that was all Avery. And it was actually based on this unproduced script Avery had written before any of this, called Pandemonium Reigns.
You want a cigarette you got up there? I'll tell you all about it.
And there was another filmmaker named Adam Rifkin.
Right.
Who was much more advanced than either of us.
And he was supposed to do the third story.
He never wrote his sequence.
Where the fuck is it?
And so for a while, that was kind of it.
Well, he put me on hold.
Pulp Fiction was put away as a couple story ideas, half written.
So he hid it?
Because,
One place he knew he could hide something.
Well, because in 1992...
His ass.
Something huge happened.
Reservoir Dogs. Reservoir Dogs was discovered at Sundance and hailed at Cannes.
Which changed everything.
Rarely in our years on the movie beat has a new director become as hot, as fast as Quentin Tarantino.
It's my personal favorite.
People were very interested, in him. People were interested in me. And so we got hired by TriStar to develop the screenplay based on what Quentin wanted to do next.
And what he wanted to do next was make Pulp Fiction.
So, on one hand, yes.
The road was paved.
It was a big difference.
All they had to do was finish writing the movie.
How did you get out?
I shot my way out.
When we finished Reservoir Dogs and we showed it at Sundance and it was all done and I was all completely and utterly done, I go, I'm going to Europe. I'm going for the summer. I'm going to be there for a while. So that was my European time. Not only was I writing Pulp Fiction, but I was just living, what's it like to be living in Europe and going grocery shopping and all that kind of stuff. It was great.
Merde, you startled me. Did you have a bad dream?
Okay, so after a while, Avery joins him in Europe, and the two of them are living out of this tiny one-room apartment in Amsterdam, and they lay out pretty much everything they've ever written out onto the floor. Mostly unfinished material that never made it into bigger projects, but also some stuff that had.
I actually wrote that specific scene, wrote that for True Romance. And, there was this whole moment in True Romance that you don't see in the movie, obviously, because those scenes were cut out and moved into Pulp Fiction. And the gun going off in the car.
Oh man, I shot Marvin in the face.
Why the fuck did you do that?
Well, I didn't mean to do it. It was an accident.
All of that was for True Romance.
True Romance, by the way, is the 1993 Tony Scott film that Tarantino wrote, based actually on another unfinished script he and Avery worked on together, called The Open Road. Because, again, at that time, Tarantino and Avery worked on everything together.
I mean, I wrote scenes as favors for Natural Born Killers.
Another early Tarantino script.
He would come to me and he's like, I can't bring myself to write the scene. Would you please do it for me, Roger?
But the two didn't just pull from each other. The whole split narrative structure of Pulp Fiction that was influenced by what a few other filmmakers around the world were trying out at that time.
Krzysztof Kieslowski's Three Colors movies, Red, White, and Blue. Jim Jarmusch did Mystery Train at that time.
Well, what about on Jupiter?
Which was multiple storylines.
At the time of his death, if he were on Jupiter, Elvis would have weighed 648 pounds.
People never talk about that film, but
648.
It was a huge influence on Pulp Fiction.
Video rental store. Pulp Fiction opened the New York Film Festival in September. It stars John Travolta, Samuel Jackson, Uma Thurman, Bruce Willis, and Harvey Keitel. And we are pleased to have the director right here, Quentin Tarantino.
So we wrote those out.
Okay, so by now the trajectory of what Pulp Fiction was going to be was all ready to go.
And we had our two stories that we had written, and Adam never wrote his.
We're going to plan this better.
And so?
Then it comes time to do the third story.
Right. And the third story was a completely different story
than was in the movie.
As Tarantino describes it,
it was like a black getaway kind of thing.
With a whole new set of characters.
I'm in Amsterdam, and
Now, at this point, it's important to note that Avery had left Europe.
Just got back from Amsterdam.
He's gone back to LA with the firm belief that he had written a third of Pulp Fiction. Meanwhile, Tarantino stays behind, embellishing every word of every story, adding new dialogue, and then, ultimately, completing the movie.
I've just written the first story, I've written the second story, and I'm getting ready to start writing the third one. And I go, I can't introduce these brand new characters in fucking hour 60. Who cares? Who cares? That's not going to work at all. And then I go, well, wait a minute. I have a non sequitur at the beginning by having these guys show up with these fellows and taking this briefcase, and I actually had the thing where they shoots the guy in the car earlier on. No, wait a minute. This is my next story. Let me just hang out with these guys.
Here it comes.
All the rest of the day, and let's just see what happens.
Better you than me, gentlemen.
And so he did, resulting in what would end up becoming the Bonnie situation.
You got to appreciate what an explosive element this Bonnie situation is.
The third and final story in Pulp Fiction.
I'm gonna get fucking divorced.
But there was a problem.
Yes, in a general way, there was a great amount of disappointment in the script when we turned it in.
Do me a favor, will you?
TriStar, which, by the way, had already invested $900,000 in the Pulp Fiction, got the script and decided they didn't like it.
Just when the script came in,
they told them, look,
super violent. It was long, and it was long, and it was violent, and the violence was super described.
And they didn't want to make it. But then Miramax came along.
And they got it.
And they swept in.
And gave Quentin the support he needed.
And,
we have Pulp Fiction.
But remember that title card I put up at the beginning? So originally, Tarantino and Avery were signed on to Pulp Fiction as co-writers. Only now, Tarantino's a pretty big deal. He wants his signature on everything he does, and he wants his movies to say, a film by Quentin Tarantino at the beginning, and written and directed by Quentin Tarantino at the end. But throw in Avery as co-writer, and suddenly you can't put written and directed up on the same card.
Up and everything, and just blow it all, just tonight,
Now, according to this book, Down and Dirty Pictures, a dive into the 90s independent film scene, the whole thing went down something like this.
Hello? Hello?
Avery gets a call from Tarantino's attorney, who basically says, hey, you can either accept a story by credit instead, or you can have nothing for Pulp Fiction. And Avery is furious, fights for his co-writing credit, but eventually gives in to the ultimatum. Again, maybe, probably, but ask Avery about all of this today, and you get a very different story. According to him, it was Tarantino who called him personally.
What do you think she'll do?
He called me and asked me if he could alter the credits contractually. It was kind of, much of it was written before Reservoir Dogs and before, all the stuff that was in there was written at this other time in our life. And he just called me up and he's like, you know what, I'd really like the credits to read this way. And, I just said, sure, yeah, go for it.
Now, normally something like this wouldn't just happen.
Pulp Fiction came at a time before we were in the Writers Guild, and so there was...
See, the Writers Guild of America has very strict rules about how credit gets assigned and displayed in a movie, but Tarantino and Avery didn't have that kind of intermediary.
There was no one telling us the credits have to read like this.
To win this handsome trophy that Marilyn here is holding.
Now, even a year ago, I would have ended the story right there. The falling out of two once great friends, gossip, drama, blame. But...
Hi, this is Quentin Tarantino.
And this is Roger Avery. We're the hosts of a new show called the Video Archives Podcast.
Each week we're going to be watching films pulled straight from the shelves of the Video Archive store where we used to work together.
We've already watched movies like Dark Star, Moonraker.
That's Tarantino and Avery, together again on their new show where they watch and discuss old movies from the original Video Archive store. Tapes that Tarantino bought when the place closed down back in '95, the same year the two won their Oscars for Pulp Fiction. And I don't know, if that ain't the right conclusion to this story, then I'll be.
It's one thing when you're just two guys working in a video store trying to write scripts, and it's another thing when you add all the other elements of the business that change the dynamic of a friendship. And so I think at a certain point it just became a conscious decision, or maybe even a subconscious decision of, let's just let our friendship be our friendship. What do you do when you pick up my guitar?
That old winner is, my goodness, it's The Empire Strikes Back.
Our first movie this week is The Empire Strikes Back, and this is the best of the three Star Wars films.
Well, Roger, let's credit the director of the film, Irvin Kershner.
It's our director, Irvin Kershner.
Who was an inspired choice. There was nothing, I don't think, in his career that would lead anyone to believe that he could have made an action picture.
So I said, okay, is it ready? It's ready. Action.
So they start to lift this huge X-Wing out of the water.
As soon as above the water, the wings do this.
Dun 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 dun.
They fold.
They just collapse. And the one day George Lucas was ever on set, he's watching all this go down.
Scene after scene didn't work.
And it wasn't just that day.
The first movie was directed by George Lucas. This one is directed by Irvin Kershner. What is the difference that you can see?
Hey, I'm Danny Boyd, and it's, 1978?
I get a call from George.
George Lucas calls up his old friend, Irvin Kershner, and he says, let's have lunch.
I said, who's paying? Anyway, I went.
And so they meet in the dining room at Universal Studios, and Lucas is like, hey.
We would be honored if you would join us.
He says,
I'd like you to make the second Star Wars.
I want you to follow up the single highest grossing film ever made.
Gee, George, I don't know.
And bear in mind, this is back when sequels were generally not that well regarded, not just by the public, but by film studios. So it has to be good. Like, really good.
He says, because if the second one works, then I'll make more.
But?
He says, if it doesn't work, then that's the end of Star Wars.
Like, forever. Alright, so Kershner hesitates, but he eventually says, okay. And he takes the movie, but with one stipulation.
The only way I could take the picture is when I told George, I'm not going to stand there on the set and have you standing over my shoulder.
Right.
I need absolute freedom to make my picture.
And that would mean a very different experience directing a Star Wars movie. For everybody.
Well, they're very different personalities, and they have a different way of getting what they want. Kershner's more vocal about what he wants, you know. I think George knows what he wants, but he sort of would rather maneuver you into it without having to come out and say, do this.
I worked so long with the script that I know pretty much everything that's expected of the scene, and I just shoot the picture. And as I go along, I vary, I change my concept often because of what I shot before, or I learn something, or I learn that I don't need a certain scene, or I learn that I haven't shown a certain person before and I have to show them now. There are about 1,000 little considerations before you can stage a scene.
For example?
Take, for instance.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite production stories ever.
How do you do a scene where, what's his name's running?
Chewie and C-3PO.
The head's going, no, don't run, don't do, you know, he's talking, and the head's going like this, and the arm is going, oh, no, stop. Right?
Right. So originally, that whole contraption was all electronic.
Cost $100,000.
Just to make the head shake and the arm flail around.
All right, put him there. Run from there to there.
Anyway, so they set everything up. They're ready to go.
All right, let's do a take.
But as soon as Kirshner calls action,
wait a minute.
It doesn't work.
What's happening?
The arm and the head kind of just wiggle, and nobody on set seems to know what to do. But then?
The prop man comes to me and says, can you give me 15, 20 minutes? I think I can fix it.
But it's electronic.
He says, I know. Give me 20 minutes.
It's about a half hour later, the prop guy comes back.
And he said, do you want to see it work?
And Kirshner says, sure.
And so I'm looking, and he starts to run.
And lo and behold,
the arm's going like this, and the head's going like that, and it's perfect. I turn back.
And standing in the very back of the room,
with a long fishing pole,
is the prop guy.
He disconnected it from the electronics, and he's moving the arm back and forth. What did that cost? Nothing. Improvisation. You can't be thrown by these things. You have to assume you can make it work.
Do or do not. There is no try.
I felt I needed humor in the picture, and yet I couldn't have gags. I felt I needed a love story, and yet I couldn't have a lot of smooching and kissing and all that stuff, and it had to all be more implied.
George had scripted an exchange between Princess Leia and Han Solo, which went like this. She said, I love you, and Han Solo said, I love you too. And it kind of seemed to me that we weren't taking advantage of the character that we'd established for Han Solo.
Who's scruffy looking?
We tried take after take after take. Nothing satisfied me. And finally, I said, Harrison, don't think about it. Don't think about it. Let's do it. Okay, action.
I love you.
I know.
And he dropped in, and I said, cut. I said, yeah, it's a great line. That's Han Solo.
Apology accepted, Captain Nida.
So, understanding the script, understanding characters, the material, obviously, all of that crucial to directing anything. But Star Wars, over the last few decades, has become so ubiquitous, so huge, it's practically its own genre now. But if you strip everything away, transport yourself back to pre-Disney, pre-1999, Star Wars is one thing. Pure, unabashed fantasy.
Some people call it science fiction. I don't even consider it science fiction. I consider it a fairy tale.
We have a fairy princess. We have an innocent farm boy who yearns for adventure. Alec Guinness is a wise old wizard who teaches me a mystical force, somewhat like Merlin would teach a young King Arthur.
In science fiction, you're very concerned about leaving a spaceship on a planet because there may not be oxygen, or the gravitational force is not the same as on Earth, or not what your body's adjusted to. And so you must take all that into consideration, or it's considered very poor science fiction. It's fairy tale. That's the environment. That's the context. But you can literally do anything. And if I believe it while I'm doing it, the audience tends to believe it too. So that's a fairy tale.
So after suffering 3 years of Star Wars ripoffs and imitations, May 21st we get the real McCoy, and it's something rare, a sequel that works.
And now I'll just leave you with this.
The first one was directed, you were directed by George Lucas. Now you're directed by Irving Kershner.
Right.
What is the difference?
Kershner's much taller.
I'm Danny Boyd. Thanks for watching.